Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a journey far, far back in time to an age when being human was one of the most dangerous things you could possibly be. Long before cities, before comfort, before even the idea of safety, our earliest ancestors walked through a world ruled by predators, where every sound in the darkness might have been the last thing you'd ever hear. This was a time when the earth was raw, violent, and beautiful, a living, breathing battlefield of survival. A world where Homo habilis, Homo ergaster, and early Homo sapiens were not the rulers of nature, but the hunted, fragile creatures struggling to stay alive amid the claws, fangs, and cold silence of prehistoric Earth. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you enjoy the kind of content that merges myth and mystery. And hey, let us know from where you're watching and what time it is for you right now. Sometimes our stories are better than sleep, and other times they make you dream louder. It's time now to dim the lights, turn on a fan for some noise, and settle in close as we travel together into the worst time to have ever been a human, the age when we were both hunter and hunted, and when every heartbeat was an act of defiance against extinction. Let's begin. The planet was restless. Vast plains stretched across Africa, punctuated by dry rivers, clusters of thorn trees, and the distant shimmer of heat. Herds of early antelope grazed under the watchful eyes of stalking predators, and above it all, the sky stretched wide and endless, heavy with the promise of both life and death. This was not yet a world built for humans. It was a world that forged them. In this dangerous theater of existence appeared a new kind of creature, small, uncertain, and fragile. They were not yet us, but they were our beginning. Homo habilis, the handyman. Their bodies were compact, their arms long, their faces still marked with the memory of apes. But behind those eyes flickered something different: curiosity, awareness, the faint, trembling spark of intelligence. These early humans were barely over a meter tall. Their lives were brief, and their world unforgiving. Every day was a test, a contest of wit and endurance against the hunger of nature itself. They had no claws, no thick hide, no sharp teeth to tear through flesh. They had nothing but their hands, and slowly, over generations, those hands began to change the rules. The story of Homo habilis is not one of triumph, but of survival against impossible odds. They scavenged more than they hunted, following the trails of the great cats and hyenas, waiting for scraps left behind by beasts more powerful than they could ever be. When a lion killed, they waited in the shadows, patient and trembling, until the predator was gone. Then, with sharp stones chipped into crude edges, they cut through the remains, muscle, marrow, fat, gathering whatever fragments they could find to keep the fire of life burning one more day. The creation of those first tools, sharp flakes of stone, marked the dawn of human technology. Each strike of rock against rock was a whisper of progress, the first echo of an idea that would never stop growing. They discovered that the world could be shaped, that survival could be crafted, and for the first time in Earth's long, brutal history, a creature looked at its environment not with instinct alone, but with thought. Still, thought did not make the world less dangerous. The savannas were ruled by monsters, giant hyenas as tall as lions, sabre-toothed cats with jaws built to crush bone, and crocodiles longer than a small boat, each a perfect engine of death. For Homo habilis, to exist was to be hunted. The night was a time of terror. Darkness brought movement, low growls, the soft pad of paws, the cry of something dying. When the sun fell, they gathered close, seeking safety in numbers, pressed together beneath the dim light of a moon they could not yet name. It was during these nights that the human mind began to awaken. Fear demanded awareness. Awareness demanded memory. Over time, fear itself became a teacher. The ones who remembered where danger lived survived longer, fed better, raised children who learned faster. Evolution favored the cautious and the clever. In the vast quiet of Africa's nights, the first whispers of what would become imagination began to stir. Picture them there, small groups moving across an endless plain, children carried on backs, tools clutched in hands. They followed herds, gathered roots, and sought shelter in caves or the low branches of trees. Rain was both a gift and a curse, bringing water but summoning predators to drink beside them. Each day required choices that balanced hunger with risk. Do you follow the scent of meat or turn back and live with the emptiness in your belly? They did not yet have fire. Warmth came only from the sun, and safety only from daylight. When the storms came, and they often did, they crouched beneath overhangs, listening to the sky tear itself apart. Lightning flashed across the plains, and sometimes, when it struck dry grass, it left behind a strange glow. Smoke, flame, terrifying and beautiful. They did not yet understand it, but in their eyes, that flickering light was magic, a preview of their destiny. The dawn of survival was also the dawn of empathy. These early humans began to form bonds beyond blood, connections that stretched between individuals in ways no animal had before. They cared for one another. They shared food, sheltered the weak, and mourned their dead in silent confusion. The social instincts we take for granted, cooperation, compassion, even grief, were shaped in the pressure of this harsh, merciless world. And though their lives were short, the legacy of Homo habilis was profound. Their hands were the first to transform stone into purpose, their minds the first to see pattern in chaos. They could plan, at least in fragments, to think not only of now, but of what might come next. A revolutionary idea, simple as it sounds. Tomorrow, to them, tomorrow was uncertain. It was the shadow of the lion they didn't yet see, the storm they sensed before the clouds appeared. But the ability to imagine a future, even a dangerous one, gave them an advantage no predator could ever match. Because from imagination came adaptation, and from adaptation came survival. Slowly, over tens of thousands of years, their descendants would grow taller, stronger, more capable. The tools would evolve, the migrations would begin, and the first sparks of fire would soon illuminate the darkness. But it all began here, with trembling hands holding sharp stones under the vast African sun, surrounded by the sound of distant predators and the smell of blood and dust. The dawn of survival was not heroic. It was desperate, cold, and uncertain. Yet, it was the beginning of everything. Every story, every city, every dream we have today was born in the struggle of these small, frightened creatures who refused to die. They didn't know it, but they were carving the first lines in the long story of humanity, a story that would lead from the bones of scavengers to the builders of worlds. And as the sun sank behind the horizon, painting the grasslands in gold and fire, Homo habilis huddled together once more, listening to the roars that echoed across the night. They had survived another day. For them, that was victory, and it was enough. The world our ancestors inherited was not built for mercy. It was a planet that still remembered the chaos of its own creation, a world ruled not by thought or invention, but by the sheer force of tooth and claw. The air was heavier then, the climate less stable. The earth trembled with the footsteps of giants, and in every direction, life and death danced together in brutal balance. When we think of danger today, we imagine what we can control. A wild animal at a distance, a storm watched from the safety of a house. But for early humans, there was no safety. The moment you stepped beyond your shelter, the world became a gamble of survival. The plains, forests, and river valleys of prehistoric Africa and Eurasia were crawling with predators so specialized, so perfect in their design, that our fragile ancestors existed on the very edge of extinction. Let's step into that world for a moment. Imagine a savanna that stretches far beyond the horizon. Dry grass whispering in the wind, the sun hanging low, and the silence broken by the distant rumble of hooves. To the right, a herd of elephants much larger than those we know today. The mighty Paleoloxodon, with tusks so long they nearly touched the ground. In the distance, a shadow moves, smooth, deliberate, and patient. The sabre-toothed cat, Homotherium, watches from the tall grass, its muscles tense beneath golden fur. Its teeth, long curved blades, glint faintly in the light. This was the nightmare landscape our ancestors walked into. Homo habilis, Homo ergaster, and later Homo erectus lived surrounded by creatures that were faster, stronger, and more lethal than anything the modern world can show us. The giant hyenas, Pachyrhocutta brevirostris, weighing nearly 400 pounds, could crush bones as thick as your wrist with a single bite. Packs of them roamed the plains, their calls echoing across the night like laughter twisted into something cruel. There were saber-toothed cats, such as Meganterion, crouched in the shadows, silent and calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But it wasn't only the land that was dangerous. Rivers and lakes hid their own assassins. Massive crocodiles, Crocodiles thorbjarnarsoni, a reptile that could reach 25 feet in length, lurked beneath the murky water, patient beyond imagination. Early humans came to drink, to wash, or to cross, and sometimes they simply vanished, one moment alive, the next gone beneath the surface, claimed by jaws older than humanity itself. Even the skies were not entirely safe. The massive Pterotornis, an ancient vulture with a wingspan wider than a man's height, circled above, drawn to the scent of death. Every creature, large or small, was part of this chain of hunger, predator and prey, locked in an eternal cycle that never paused, never pitied, never forgave. The landscape of the Pleistocene and late Pliocene epochs was both stunning and horrifying. There were open grasslands and dense forests, freezing tundras and blistering deserts. Seasons came like tempests, reshaping entire habitats. A long drought could erase the herds that humans depended on. A sudden flood could destroy a camp and sweep away generations of memory. Nature, vast and indifferent, offered only one command: adapt or die. To survive among these titans, early humans had to become something more than prey. Their evolution was shaped not in comfort, but in crisis. Every encounter, every brush with death, rewired their instinct. When a saber-tooth's roar shattered the stillness, it carved into the brain the ancient reflex that still tightens our stomachs when we hear a sudden sound in the dark. When the cry of a hyena echoed from the hills, it taught them to move quietly, to hide, to wait. Our ancestors began to understand patterns, where predators hunted, when they rested, how they followed herds. Knowledge became as valuable as strength. To know the habits of death was to delay it, even for a single day. They learned that the tall grass was both friend and foe, that cliffs and trees could save a life if you climbed fast enough, and that silence was often more powerful than any weapon they could hold. In time, the human mind became a tool sharper than the claws of any beast. It was still crude, still forming, but it had one advantage that no predator could match: imagination. A lion could learn, a hyena could adapt, but only a human could imagine something that did not yet exist. They began to think in ifs and maybes. If we wait until the cats sleep, if we move when the wind is behind us, if we use the stones like this. Those small thoughts were the first embers of intelligence, the kind that would one day build fire and shape the stars. But in this era, knowledge did not guarantee survival. Even the most cautious bands of early humans suffered losses. Children disappeared. Hunters didn't return. Entire groups vanished in the path of drought, disease, or the jaws of larger predators. The planet was not interested in fairness. It was a testing ground, stripping away the weak and rewarding only those who could adapt fast enough to stay one step ahead. When night fell, the world transformed again. The air cooled, the wind carried sound for miles, eyes glowed from the dark, yellow, red, unblinking. For humans, night was the realm of fear. They huddled together on higher ground, wrapped in whatever warmth they could find, listening to the movement of predators through the grass. The stars above looked cold and unreachable, glittering like fragments of fire they could never touch. Some nights, the cries of dying animals filled the air like distant thunder, and sleep became a dangerous luxury. Still, within this danger was transformation. It was precisely this constant pressure, this fragile balance between life and death, that forced the evolution of something extraordinary: cooperation. No creature survived alone. The human ability to communicate, to plan, to share watch over the darkness was born here, among the shadows of monsters. Even now, buried deep within our instincts, that memory lingers. The reason we feel uneasy in the dark, the reason we fear the sound of something moving unseen, is because for millions of years, darkness was the predator's domain. We are the children of those who listened, who stayed awake, who feared the night, and lived because of it. A planet of giants and killers. That is what Earth was, a testing ground for the fragile experiment of humanity. And somehow, impossibly, that experiment survived. Every time the sun rose and the first light swept across the plains, another day began, another chance for our ancestors to defy extinction. They were not yet the masters of their world. They were not even safe, but they were learning, and every lesson written in blood brought them one step closer to what we would become. The world would remain merciless for a very long time, but so too would grow the spark that refused to be extinguished, the stubborn will to live and to understand. Long before the first fire, before speech or shelter, there was stone, cold, heavy, and silent, yet filled with potential. And it was Homo habilis, the handyman, who first saw that potential and changed the course of our species forever. Picture the landscape: a valley in East Africa, near what we now call the Great Rift. The earth is cracked and red beneath a relentless sun. Dust hangs in the air, and the faint smell of decay drifts from a carcass nearby. A small group of early humans moves cautiously toward it. They are thin and alert, their faces sharp with hunger. They are not hunters yet, not truly. The kill belongs to a lion, its bones scattered, ribs gnawed clean, but scattered nearby lie pieces of flesh and marrow, abandoned when the predators moved on. The group gathers around the remains, their eyes darting to the horizon, searching for movement. In those moments of danger, hunger, and fear are the same thing. But one of them kneels and picks up a stone. Not just any stone, but one with an edge. He turns it in his hand, strikes it with another rock, and the sharp edge chips cleanly away. A spark of understanding flickers. Another strike, and another flake falls. In the dust, a weapon is born, the first deliberate tool. What Homo habilis created wasn't elegant, but it worked. With that flake of stone, meat could be cut, tendons sliced, hides separated. The act of shaping the world to serve a purpose had begun. Each sharp edge was a quiet revolution, one that no predator could match. Archaeologists call these early tools Oldowan, named for Olduvai Gorge, where their remains were found. Simple cores and flakes, battered and sharp, each a testament to thought. They were the first human inventions, extensions of the body and the mind, and they marked the beginning of technology, the first hint of dominance over a world that had once seemed unchangeable. But the creation of tools did more than help them eat. It changed the way they saw the world. Suddenly, everything could be something else. A stick wasn't just a branch, it could be a lever. A stone wasn't just part of the earth. It could be shaped, sharpened, wielded. This small leap in perception was immense. It meant foresight, intention, imagination, and with imagination came cooperation. One could make a tool, another could use it. The act of sharing became essential, passing down knowledge, teaching the young how to strike the stones in the right way, how to read the shape of a rock, how to find the perfect piece of flint. Slowly, the rhythm of life began to change. Before tools, survival was reaction, a life of waiting, watching, fleeing. After tools, there was action. Homo habilis could carve a path where none existed. They could scrape meat from bone faster than scavengers. They could open marrow-filled femurs and feast on the rich fat that sustained their brains and bodies. And as they did, something began to grow inside their skulls. Literally, their brains expanded from roughly 500 cubic centimeters in earlier ancestors to nearly 700 in the later ones. The mind was evolving to fit the new demands of thought. Each generation grew slightly more capable, slightly more aware. The connection between hand and mind deepened, a relationship that would define the entire future of humanity. To shape stone required control, focus, and vision. The act of tool making was not only survival, it was meditation. In the repetition of striking stone upon stone, humans were sculpting themselves as much as their tools. But this new intelligence came with a price. Awareness brought fear. To imagine the future meant to imagine death. To remember the past meant to carry loss. As they gathered around the remains of their dead, as they looked into the eyes of a fallen companion, the understanding of mortality began to take root. In that sense, Homo habilis was the first creature to live with the knowledge of its own fragility. And yet, even in that fragility, there was strength. Small groups began to form tighter bonds. They communicated not yet with words, but with gestures, expressions, and sounds that carried meaning, the beginnings of language, the first flickers of empathy. When one was injured, others stayed. When one found food, they shared. Cooperation became the shield that instinct alone could never provide. Imagine a dusk long ago, when the sun sinks below the grasslands and the shadows lengthen. A group of Homo habilis gathers in a shallow ravine, sharing the meat of a scavenged antelope. The air cools, insects hum, and in the distance a lion's roar rolls like thunder. They eat quickly, bones cracking under stone, every sense alert. Yet beneath the fear, there is something else. Connection. They are not alone anymore. For the first time in history, they belong to something larger than themselves. Their world was still perilous, beyond imagination. Disease, drought, predators. Any could end them in an instant. But with each new tool, they tilted the balance of survival slightly in their favor. They began to understand that strength could come not from the body, but from the mind, that the world could be reshaped. Over generations, those crude tools spread. Every edge carried a story. Where it was found, how it was made, what it had cut. The landscape itself bore their signature. Scattered across ancient valleys, fragments of their lives remained buried for millions of years, waiting to be discovered. Each flake a silent reminder that here, in this harsh land, something remarkable had begun. For the first time, humanity had power, not enough to conquer, but enough to survive. And survival was everything. Homo habilis didn't know they were inventing history. They only knew hunger, fear, and the need to see another sunrise. Yet in their simple act of shaping stone, they unknowingly struck the first spark of civilization. So when we think of invention, we often imagine grand machines or cities of light. But it all started here, with trembling hands, in the heat of an African valley, holding a single flake of sharp stone. The first toolmaker was not a hero, not a genius, but a survivor. And that survival, repeated over countless generations, built the foundation for everything that would follow. When the stars rose above their heads that night, and the grass whispered in the wind, Homo habilis lay down among their kind, full for the first time in days. Somewhere in the darkness, a hyena laughed. But this time, they didn't run. They had tools now, and for the first time, humanity had a weapon against the world. Step into the African savannah. Millions of years ago, the air is hot and dry, vibrating with the hum of insects and the restless murmur of distant herds. The grass stretches tall, golden, and endless, moving in waves with the wind. Every shadow hides possibility, a predator, a shelter, or a sudden death. This was the domain of the early humans, a land both magnificent and terrifying, where life was never guaranteed and every step demanded attention. The savannah was not uniform. Rolling plains gave way to clusters of acacia trees, scattered waterholes, and rocky outcrops that offered fleeting refuge. Fires sometimes raged in the dry season, reshaping the landscape overnight, and rivers could swell in a single storm, washing away everything in their path. But it was not only nature that shaped the savanna, it was also the predators that hunted there, masters of stealth and power, each perfected to dominate this vast, open theater of survival. Early humans, Homo habilis, Homo ergaster, and later Homo erectus, had no natural defenses against these creatures. They were small, weak, and vulnerable, with nothing but intelligence, cooperation, and the crude tools they fashioned to give them an edge. Every day was a negotiation between hunger and safety. They had to eat, yet each attempt to gather food carried the risk of becoming food themselves. The delicate balance of life on the savanna demanded constant vigilance. Predators were everywhere. The sabre-toothed cats, Homotherium and Meganterion, stalked silently through the tall grass, their eyes sharp and calculating. One misstep, one careless glance, could bring a hunter to its knees. Lions and leopards, not yet tamed by human strategy, roamed in small groups or alone, testing every shadow for weakness. Giant hyenas prowled in packs, their bone-crushing jaws capable of breaking any skeletal structure they encountered. Even crocodiles, lurking at rivers and water holes, waited for the careless to approach. Every choice, from where to drink water to where to sleep at night, could be fatal. Yet the savanna was also a place of opportunity. Herds of herbivores, antelope, zebras, and elephants provided sustenance for predators and scavengers alike. Homo habilis and their descendants learned to read the land, tracking movement, understanding the rhythms of predator and prey, and scavenging with cunning patience. Stone tools allowed them to strip meat from bones, crack open marrow, and extract nutrients that would have been impossible to access otherwise. They were learning that the world could be understood, mapped, and manipulated to their advantage. But survival required more than tools. It required strategy. Early humans moved in small groups, constantly communicating through gestures, sounds, and shared attention. They learned to watch the sky and the ground, to sense the presence of predators, even when unseen. They noticed patterns. When the wind shifted, when prey fled, when a predator growled from the shadows, each observation was a small victory, a lesson passed down through repetition and imitation, shaping behavior and cognition over countless generations. Imagine a group of early humans traveling across a dry plain, the sun lowering the temperature and casting long, thin shadows across the grass. They stop near a waterhole, alert to every sound. A distant roar signals a lion, and they pause, frozen, watching as the predator moves past the edge of the vision. They drink cautiously, taking only what is necessary, leaving the rest to the creatures better adapted to claim it. Each movement is calculated. Each heartbeat carries both fear and focus. The line between life and death is so thin, it is almost imperceptible. The savanna is also a place of constant sensory engagement. The smell of fresh grass, scorched earth, and water mixes with the scent of predators and prey. The air vibrates with the chirping of insects, the distant calls of primates, and the thud of hoofbeats. Early humans had to interpret this world with precision, recognizing danger not only visually, but through scent, sound, and intuition. This heightened awareness was both a burden and a tool. Awareness of death became awareness of life. Fire had not yet been mastered by Homo habilis, so warmth, protection, and light were scarce commodities. Nights were especially dangerous. Darkness obscured predators, amplified sound, and made movement treacherous. Humans slept in small groups, on elevated or rocky terrain whenever possible, using vigilance and proximity as their defense. Each morning that they awoke was a victory, a chance to continue their tenuous existence. And yet, despite the danger, life on the savannah demanded adaptation. Some individuals became faster runners, more skilled climbers, or more observant scavengers. Groups that worked together survived longer than those that moved in isolation. Cooperation was no longer optional, it was the very mechanism of survival. Sharing food, warning of predators, and teaching techniques for tool use or navigation allowed humans to persist in a world that otherwise might have claimed them in hours. The savannah also shaped the body. Legs became longer, endurance improved, and hands more dexterous. The mind grew as well, expanding in response to the challenges of tracking prey, anticipating predators, and planning for the next day. Every trial of hunger, every brush with a predator, every dawn survived was a shaping force, molding humans into creatures capable of both thought and endurance. It was not a world of leisure or rest. There was no moment free from risk. Yet, paradoxically, this constant threat also fostered creativity. The humans of the savannah began to innovate using their environment, stones, branches, water, and fire when it appeared, to craft tools, shelters, and strategies. Danger demanded ingenuity, and ingenuity became the defining trait of our species. The savannah is a paradox, brutal and beautiful, deadly and full of possibility. For the early humans who roamed its grasses, it was the ultimate teacher. It forced them to adapt, to think, and to cooperate. It forced them to understand their fragility and their potential. Those who listened to its rhythms, who learned from its dangers, survived long enough to leave their mark on the world. Every morning on the savannah was a fresh battle. Every sunset, a quiet celebration of survival. And while the predators still roamed and the dangers never ceased, humans learned that intelligence, cooperation, and careful observation could tip the scales ever so slightly in their favor. They were still small and fragile, still prey in a land of giants, but they were beginning to understand the rules of the game. In the endless golden plains, under the wide African sky, the dance of survival continued, a delicate interplay between life and death, predator and prey. And somewhere in the midst of it, the ancestors of humanity moved forward, step by careful step, learning not just to exist, but to endure. The savannah was cruel, relentless, and beautiful, and it was here, among the endless grasses, that early humans began to write the first chapters of their long, astonishing journey. The savannah held many dangers, but none inspired fear more than the saber-toothed cats. These creatures were the apex predators of their time, sculpted by evolution to perfection. Homotherium, Megantherion, and Dinofelis were not just hunters. They were living engines of death, moving with lethal grace across a landscape that was already treacherous. For early humans, encountering one was a test of instinct, intelligence, and sheer luck, a brush with extinction that could come in a single heartbeat. Imagine the golden grasses of the late afternoon, sunlight stretching long shadows across the land. A small group of Homo habilis, or Homo ergaster, moves carefully toward a water hole. Their eyes flick from movement to movement, ears tuned to the slightest sound. In the distance, a pair of glowing eyes watches from the cover of the trees. The saber-toothed cat has been observing them for hours. Its body is built for ambush. Powerful forelimbs, retractable claws, a jaw lined with teeth longer than any human finger. Its roar, rarely heard, is a low, vibrating warning to all in the vicinity. These cats were not like modern lions or tigers. Their killing technique was surgical, perfected by millennia of hunting evolution. The elongated canines could pierce necks and crush windpipes with precision. When they struck, they killed quickly, lightning fast, efficient, and deadly. For early humans, survival depended not only on recognition, but on strategy. Every rustle in the grass, every shadow across the sun, could signify an approaching threat. Encounters with these predators were not rare. Fossil evidence shows bones of prey animals riddled with saber-toothed teeth marks, often near human habitation sites. Early humans learned quickly to read the signs, the tracks, the broken twigs, the faint drag marks across the ground. They became students of fear, observing the predator silently, learning its habits, and preparing contingencies. The danger was constant, but it also fostered ingenuity. Humans began to understand that they could avoid the predator rather than confront it directly. They learned to climb trees, hide in dense underbrush, or use water as a temporary shield. These were early lessons in tactics and planning, skills that would define human survival for millennia. Sometimes, though, avoidance was impossible. A saber-toothed cat could strike without warning, emerging from the shadows like a living phantom. Its movement was terrifyingly quiet, a controlled glide across the terrain that made escape a matter of instinct and speed. Young children were carried, elders sheltered, and groups formed protective circles to fend off sudden attacks. Communication became critical. Hand signals, calls, and huddling together became life-saving behaviors. These encounters shaped not only behavior, but biology. The pressure of constant predation favored those who could think ahead, those with sharper eyes, better coordination, and faster reflexes. It influenced the development of larger brains and more complex social structures. Every surviving member of a group carried lessons of the predator's strategy, passing knowledge to the next generation. The memory of danger became embedded in culture, behavior, and perhaps even the earliest forms of storytelling. The saber-toothed cats were not indiscriminate. They targeted the weak, the slow, the careless. But humans, small and clever, were different. They were unpredictable. They carried tools, moved in groups, and adapted. In many ways, early humans became adversaries that these apex predators could not fully predict. The encounter was a battle not of strength, but of wit and awareness. The first hints of what would make humanity extraordinary. At night, the presence of these predators was even more haunting. Eyes glinting in the firelight, roars echoing across the landscape, and the occasional scream of a hunted animal reminded early humans that darkness belonged to the hunters. They slept lightly, always alert, dreams punctuated by the imagined snap of jaws or the flash of teeth. The saber-toothed cat was more than a predator. It was a teacher, instilling fear and respect, shaping instincts that would survive through millions of years of evolution. Some groups developed strategies specifically to deal with these cats. Stones and sharpened sticks could serve as deterrents. Fires could be lit as beacons of warning. Vigilance became a constant companion, and over time, the bond within human groups strengthened. Survival was not a solitary endeavor. It required shared knowledge and mutual protection. The shadow of the saber-toothed cat created the conditions for cooperation, communication, and the development of social cohesion. Even today, we can sense the legacy of these encounters. The human instinct to fear predators, to react to sudden movement, to remain alert in unfamiliar environments, all echo the lessons learned during encounters with creatures like Homotherium and Megantherion. The fear that guided early humans away from danger is the same fear that still keeps us alive in moments of uncertainty. Despite the danger, these encounters were not purely terrifying. They were awe-inspiring. To witness a saber-toothed cat moving silently through the grass, to see its body perfectly adapted to killing, was to glimpse the raw power of evolution. Early humans were students of nature, learning not only to avoid death, but to understand life in its most intense and extreme form. Every interaction, every close call, added to a growing reservoir of knowledge that would be passed down quietly, generation to generation. Some individuals undoubtedly fell prey. Fossil records show humans and other primates missing, devoured, or crushed beneath the jaws of these predators. But those who survived carried the wisdom forward. They learned timing, positioning, and environmental reading. They developed the first strategies of avoidance, cooperation, and perhaps even the rudimentary beginnings of what we might call planning. In essence, the saber-toothed cat was a sculptor of the human mind. The constant threat of its presence pushed early humans to develop skills beyond instinct, observation, anticipation, and foresight. It forced humans to communicate more effectively, to cooperate more tightly, and to innovate more boldly. Every narrow escape, every observation of its hunting behavior contributed to a growing arsenal of survival techniques. And so, in the golden light of the savannah, amid the rustling grass and distant calls of prey, early humans learned to coexist with the most fearsome predators Earth has ever known. The saber-toothed cats were killers, yes, but they were also unwitting teachers. They forced the evolution of caution, intelligence, and cooperation. They were part of the crucible that molded humanity into something capable of enduring even the deadliest landscapes. To encounter a saber-toothed cat was to brush against death itself. Yet in that encounter, humanity found the first sparks of ingenuity, the first lessons in strategy, and the earliest proof that survival was not merely a matter of strength, but of mind, of foresight, and of unity. For the humans of the Pleistocene, the saber-toothed cat was both nightmare and guide, a terrifying mirror reflecting the challenge of existence and the extraordinary potential to overcome it. While the saber-toothed cats ruled with stealth and precision, the savannah was also dominated by another kind of terror, relentless, bone-crushing, and endlessly opportunistic. The giant hyenas of the Pleistocene, Pachyrhina brevirostris, were the bulldozers of the ancient plains. Standing nearly 4 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing up to 400 pounds, these predators were more than just scavengers. They were apex hunters in their own right. Pack hunters. They moved with coordination that rivaled the intelligence of the early humans themselves. Imagine the plain at dusk, The sun sinks behind distant hills, painting the horizon in blood orange hues. The wind carries the scent of water, grass, and prey. Somewhere in the distance, a herd of antelope grazes, cautious but unaware. Suddenly, a rustle, sharp, measured, eyes gleam in the twilight. The giant hyenas are moving low to the ground, muscles rippling beneath coarse fur, jaws poised to crush bone with terrifying efficiency. These hyenas were masters of adaptation. Unlike lions or leopards, they were not dependent on stealth alone. They could scavenge the remains left by other predators or hunt cooperatively, using endurance and relentless pursuit to wear down their prey. They were opportunists, flexible and intelligent, capable of exploiting any weakness. For early humans, encountering a single hyena was dangerous enough. Encountering a pack was often fatal. Yet the humans of the savannah did not flee blindly. They were learning, slowly, how to coexist in a world filled with predators whose power surpassed their own. Observation became a key tool. By watching the hyenas, humans learned to recognize warning signs: the subtle arch of a back, the twitch of a tail, the pattern of movement that indicated a hunt. They began to understand that patience and caution could be just as valuable as speed or strength. Cooperation became essential. Humans moved in small bands, watching for predators, protecting the vulnerable, sharing resources. The pack structure of hyenas may have inspired humans to observe the advantages of coordinated effort. By learning to work together, early humans increased their chances of survival in a landscape dominated by creatures that hunted with ruthless efficiency. But these encounters were not only about survival. They were lessons in resilience and strategy. Hyenas could smell fear, detect hesitation, and exploit mistakes. Early humans had to anticipate, improvise, and sometimes retreat to live another day. Their intelligence, still developing, was constantly tested. Every movement, every choice carried consequences. To survive meant understanding not just the predator, but oneself, one's strengths, limitations, and instincts. The giant hyena's influence extended beyond immediate danger. Fossil records reveal that humans and hyenas often competed for the same resources: kill sites, bones rich with marrow, and waterholes were arenas of silent conflict. Early humans began to adapt, using tools not only to process food, but to defend against scavengers. Sharp stones and sticks became deterrents. Clever placement of obstacles, elevated sleeping areas, and fire, once mastered, could ward off even the most determined pack. Wild dogs, smaller but equally formidable, shared the plains with these hyenas. Packs of Lycaon ancestors moved in remarkable synchrony, their stamina and strategy allowing them to hunt tirelessly over long distances. They were relentless, efficient, and highly social, a mirror of the very social structures early humans were developing in response to constant predation. In a sense, every predator was both a challenge and a teacher, shaping cognition, communication, and cooperation. Night brought particular challenges. Darkness amplified fear. Yet humans learned to harness the cover of night in their favor. They slept lightly, huddled together, listening for the distant calls of hyenas or the soft padding of wild dogs approaching. Fires, when discovered or mastered, provided light, warmth, and security, allowing humans to reclaim some measure of control over their environment. But even fire was not a guarantee. Predators' intelligence was formidable, and packs could circle, wait, and probe the weaknesses of a group. Life in the presence of these predators demanded constant vigilance. Humans developed heightened senses, acute hearing, keen observation, and the ability to interpret subtle environmental cues. Every crack of a twig, every shift of the grass, every scent carried information. Early humans learned that survival required attention not only to predators, but to one another. Protecting the young, the sick, and the elderly became a shared responsibility, a strategy that ensured the continuation of the group. Encounters with giant hyenas and wild dogs were both terrifying and instructive. Early humans learned to negotiate danger with intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability. They began to anticipate patterns, exploit weaknesses, and prepare for threats before they became immediate. The predator-rich savanna became a crucible, forcing humans to develop traits that would define our species: problem-solving, communication, foresight, and empathy. Over generations, these lessons were passed down, not through books or lectures, but through experience, imitation, and memory. The landscape itself became a teacher. Humans who ignored the warning signs of predators did not survive. Those who paid attention, adapted, and collaborated were able to persist, slowly expanding their territory, developing new tools, and refining strategies that would carry forward for millennia. And yet, the savanna was never tamed. Even as humans became cleverer, stronger, and more coordinated, the giant hyenas and wild dogs remained a constant presence. Every encounter was a reminder of fragility and mortality, a negotiation with forces larger and more lethal than themselves. Fear was an enduring companion, not paralyzing, but motivating. It drove early humans to observe, to plan, to innovate. It taught caution without surrender, strategy without complacency. In this unforgiving landscape, humans were learning to survive, not by dominating the predators outright, but by understanding them, anticipating their moves, and using intellect to balance the scales. The giant hyenas and wild dogs were formidable opponents, yet in shaping human behavior, they became unintended allies, sculptors of cognition, cooperation, and resilience. As the sun sank behind the horizon, painting the savanna in shadows and firelight, the early humans huddled together, sharing warmth, vigilance, and knowledge. Somewhere in the distance, a hyena pack called to one another, their voices echoing across the plain. The humans listened, adapted, and endured. They were prey, yes, but they were also learners, innovators, and survivors. Every step they took across the golden grasses was a testament to perseverance in the face of relentless danger, and in that delicate balance between predator and prey, fear and ingenuity, life and death. The stage was set for the next chapter of human evolution. The giant hyenas and wild dogs were more than threats. They were catalysts, forcing the earliest humans to develop the traits that would one day define our species: intelligence, cooperation, empathy, and foresight, all shaped in response to the predators of the savanna. The lessons of the plains, the mountains, and the water holes were simple, yet profound. Adapt, cooperate, observe, and survive. And so, even in the shadow of jaws and claws, humanity endured, growing stronger, smarter, and more resilient one cautious step at a time. Night in the prehistoric world was unlike anything we experience today. There were no streetlights, no walls to shield you, no soft hum of civilization to mask the sounds of the wild. Darkness stretched endlessly across the plains, forests, and river valleys, swallowing everything in a quiet that was both complete and terrifying. For early humans, the fall of night was not a signal for rest. It was a reminder that the world belonged to predators and that survival depended on vigilance, cooperation, and instinct sharpened by constant awareness. As the sun sank below the horizon, the shadows lengthened. The warm gold of daylight gave way to a cooler, dimmer world. Colors faded and shapes became distorted. Every movement of the grass, every flicker of shadow from a tree or rock became a potential threat. The early humans of the savannah and forests learned quickly that night was different, not only darker, but filled with creatures that moved with skill, perfected for hunting in low light. Lions, leopards, hyenas, crocodiles along the rivers, and sabre-toothed cats that prowled silently through the tall grass all became more active as darkness fell. The auditory world changed first. The rustling of leaves, the snapping of twigs, and distant cries became amplified. Humans relied heavily on their ears, interpreting sound with precision that would be remarkable even today. The call of a hyena pack across the valley meant they were on the move. The sudden roar of a distant lion indicated the presence of an apex predator marking its territory. Even the faint trickle of a river could signal safety or danger. Predators often waited near waterholes for an unsuspecting drinker. For the earliest humans, fire was still a rare, dangerous, and precious tool. Only later would mastery of flame provide warmth, light, and protection. Until that time, darkness was absolute. Sleep was a risk. Rest was brief. Vigilance was essential. Groups huddled together, choosing elevated areas or rocky outcrops that offered better visibility and protection. Proximity provided safety. The young and injured were kept at the center, while adults on the edges acted as sentries. Communication relied on gestures, quiet sounds, and subtle signals, an early, instinctive form of coordination that allowed survival in an otherwise merciless environment. Even with these strategies, danger was constant. Predators knew the humans were vulnerable at night. Lions could silently encircle a group. Hyenas could probe from multiple directions, and leopards could descend unseen from a tree above. One misstep, one misjudged movement, and a life could end instantly. Yet humans learned to coexist with this danger. They became observers of behavior, reading predator cues, learning patterns, and responding with instinctive intelligence. Fear became a teacher, shaping every decision, every movement, every instinctive reaction. Night was also a time for discovery. The darkness forced early humans to rely on senses they might have neglected during the day. Hearing, touch, smell, and intuition became heightened. The shadows taught them patience, the silence taught them attention, and the threats taught them foresight. By navigating the night, humans were training minds and bodies to interpret a complex, perilous environment, laying the foundation for ingenuity, planning, and the complex social behavior that would define the species. Predators were not the only challenge. The cold of the night in some regions, especially as humans migrated to higher altitudes or colder climates, could be deadly. Without fire or shelter, hypothermia was a real threat. Rainstorms turned plains to mud, and wind chilled exposed skin. Every night was a negotiation between survival and comfort, between vigilance and the fleeting respite of sleep. Yet night also fostered creativity and connection. In small groups, humans likely began to share sounds, simple stories, and gestures. Bonds were strengthened in these hours of vulnerability. The young learned from the old. Techniques were passed down. Knowledge about predators, about terrain, about water sources, and about survival strategies was imprinted on memory, building the foundation of culture. Fear, paradoxically, became a source of unity. Groups that trusted one another survived more often than those that did not. The psychological pressure of night cannot be overstated. Early humans were aware of mortality in a way most animals are not. They could anticipate death and understand it as a constant possibility. The cries of predators, the rustling of unseen movement, and the occasional loss of a companion made mortality immediate and personal. Yet within that awareness arose the first glimmers of imagination, planning, and abstract thought, traits that would eventually lead to the mastery of fire, the creation of shelters, and the development of complex social structures. Imagine a night in prehistoric Africa. A small group of Homo ergaster, or early Homo sapiens, sits on a rocky ridge, pressed close together. The young cling to the older members. A wind stirs the tall grass, carrying the scent of distant predators. Somewhere, a hyena laughs, a sound echoing across the valley. A lion's roar vibrates through the still air. Every sense is engaged, every instinct on alert, and yet they endure. They survive until the first hint of dawn, until the light returns to illuminate the world and grant a temporary reprieve. It was a cycle that repeated for thousands of generations. Nightfall was danger, but it was also structure. It taught humans the rhythm of life, the value of community, and the importance of foresight. Early humans were learning not only how to survive, but how to anticipate, adapt, and innovate. Each night, each close call, each predator encounter shaped the species in profound and lasting ways. Night also deepened the mystery of existence. In the darkness, humans would have noticed the stars above, distant lights, unchanging and eternal. In the absence of fire, the night sky was a vast, silent canvas. It may have inspired wonder, fear, and curiosity in equal measure. These moments, though fleeting, were likely the beginnings of imagination, myth, and the recognition of a world beyond immediate survival. So when night fell on prehistoric Earth, it was a teacher, a test, and a mirror of the fragility and ingenuity of early humans. It demanded awareness, fostered cooperation, and shaped instincts that continue to echo within us today. Those who mastered the night, even partially, survived to teach others, to pass down knowledge, and to keep the fragile flame of humanity alive. In darkness, humans learned patience. In silence, they learned observation. In fear, they learned strategy. Night was not merely a challenge, it was a crucible, shaping every sense, every thought, and every heartbeat. And it was under the cover of night that the earliest humans began to understand their place in a world that could, in an instant, erase them entirely. By dawn, when the first light returned to paint the plains in gold, humans emerged still alive, their minds sharpened, their bodies strengthened, and their bonds reinforced. Night had tested them. Night had taught them And in the balance of fear and survival, early humans continued their slow, improbable journey, step by careful step, across a world of predators, danger, and boundless possibility. As humans evolved, one lineage began to stand out among the small, vulnerable bands of the Savannah, Homo ergaster, emerging roughly 1.9 million years ago in East Africa. They were taller, more agile, and more intelligent than their predecessors. They carried the legacy of Homo habilis's stone tools and took survival to a new level, blending endurance, strategy, and foresight to navigate a world filled with predators and uncertainty. Picture them moving across the plains at dawn, long shadows stretching behind their lean, muscular frames. Legs longer than their forebears allowed them to run farther, faster, and more efficiently. Unlike modern humans, their endurance running was a critical adaptation, allowing them to track prey or escape predators over vast distances. They could exhaust animals in the heat of the day, pursuing antelope or smaller mammals until the creatures faltered, turning hunting into a calculated and disciplined act rather than a desperate gamble. Yet speed was not their only tool. Homo ergaster inherited the cognitive sparks of earlier humans, but their brains were larger, averaging around 900 cubic centimeters, giving them greater capacity for planning, observation, and communication. They were thinkers and strategists, capable of coordinating hunts, understanding predator behavior, and exploiting environmental patterns with remarkable skill. Every movement, every choice was informed by observation and memory. Survival had become more than instinct. It was a carefully crafted process. Their hands were precise. They shaped stone tools into more sophisticated forms. The Aculean hand axe being the most iconic, balanced, sharp, and versatile. These tools were designed for cutting, scraping, and processing meat with efficiency that earlier humans could not achieve. A single hand axe could transform the odds of survival. It could strip meat from bone, split marrow for nourishment, or serve as a defensive weapon against scavengers and predators. With these tools, Homo ergaster were beginning to assert control over the world around them, not by brute strength, but through ingenuity. Fire was another frontier. While mastery of fire would come later, there is evidence that Homo ergaster may have been among the first to use natural fires, controlling flames left by lightning strikes or volcanic activity to cook food and provide warmth. Fire was more than utility, it was protection. Even a small flame could deter nocturnal predators, illuminate a campsite, and create a center for social activity. Around the glow of fire, early humans learned cooperation, communication, and the first inklings of culture. Imagine a scene near a dry riverbed. The sun dips low, and a group of Homo ergaster sets up a temporary camp. One adult carefully tends to embers from a lightning-struck fire, while others process the day's hunt using hand axes to strip meat and split bones. Children watch intently, learning through observation. The night will bring danger, but they are safer than their ancestors. They are beginning to manipulate the world in ways that earlier humans could not imagine. Endurance running, precise tools, and control of fire all contributed to a new strategy of survival. No longer were humans solely reactive. They could plan. They could anticipate prey behavior, avoid predators, and organize in groups to maximize safety and efficiency. Social cohesion became essential. Coordination allowed them to distribute food, protect the vulnerable, and communicate about threats before they became immediate. Each survival success reinforced these behaviors, embedding them in culture and instinct alike. Yet life remained precarious. Even with these advances, predators were relentless. A saber-toothed cat could still ambush a hunter in the tall grass. Giant hyenas could stalk near waterholes. Crocodiles waded silently in rivers. Homo ergaster had advantages, but no creature was immune to the sudden, sharp edge of death. Awareness, cooperation, and foresight were their shields, and every dawn survived was a testament to skill, cunning, and endurance. Their physical evolution was intertwined with these survival strategies: long legs for running, broad shoulders for carrying tools and prey, hands capable of precision gripping, and larger brains all reflected a species honed by challenge. They were no longer purely scavengers. They were hunters, thinkers, and early engineers of survival. Each adaptation, mental and physical, was a response to the harshness of the Pleistocene world, to a landscape that was both magnificent and merciless. The social structures of Homo ergaster were likely more complex than anything seen before. Coordinated hunting, shared vigilance against predators, and division of labor within small groups suggest that communication was increasingly sophisticated. They likely used vocalizations, gestures, and shared attention to organize their activities. Cooperation was no longer optional, it was essential. Their intelligence was reflected not only in tools or fire use, but in the ability to act as a cohesive unit in a dangerous environment. Endurance running also created opportunities that earlier humans lacked. By tracking prey over long distances, they could exploit the weaknesses of animals adapted for bursts of speed rather than sustained effort. Hunting became a contest of stamina and strategy. Humans could follow herds for hours, predicting movement, coordinating with others, and selecting targets with precision. In essence, they were learning that survival required not only strength, but patience, planning, and observation, lessons that would resonate through millennia. At night, Homo ergaster gathered around firelight or safe terrain, sharing the results of the day's hunt, tending injuries, and teaching younger members. These quiet moments built trust, reinforced knowledge, and strengthened bonds, the earliest forms of culture and community. Danger was never far, but these small innovations, repeated daily, expanded the range of possibilities for human survival. Homo ergaster represents a pivotal chapter in human evolution, the point where intelligence, endurance, and tool use combined to create a species capable of more than mere survival. They were the first to integrate strategy, communication, and foresight into daily life, building behaviors and skills that would carry forward into later humans, including Homo sapiens. They were learners, adapters, and innovators, the first true bridge between early humans who scavenged and the humans who would one day shape civilizations. And so, as the sun set over the vast plains, Homo ergaster stood taller, ran faster, and thought harder than their ancestors. The world was still dangerous, full of predators, famine, and death, but humans were beginning to bend it to their will. Each hand axe struck, each ember tended, and each cautious step across the plains was a testament to endurance, intelligence, and the stubborn drive to survive. The Pleistocene epoch, spanning from roughly 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago, was a time of giants. When early humans walked the earth, they shared it with creatures so enormous, so powerful, that they would seem like monsters to our modern eyes. Woolly mammoths towered above the grasslands, their curved tusks spanning over 10 feet. Giant ground sloths moved deliberately through forests, stripping branches and foliage with strength unmatched by any human. Even the plains themselves seemed alive with the weight of creatures that could crush a man with a single step. For early humans, encountering these megafauna was both a marvel and a threat. These were animals that could eat them, trample them, or alter the landscape in ways that made survival more difficult. Yet they were also resources. A mammoth provided not only meat, but bones for tools, hides for shelter, and tusks for crafting. Humans were learning to navigate a world where every interaction with these giants carried extreme risk and potential reward. Imagine a herd of mammoths crossing a vast plain at dusk. Dust rises beneath their massive feet. Their tusks curve like scythes, and their trunks sweep the grass aside as they move with deliberate authority. Early humans, observing from a distance, recognize the danger and opportunity alike. Hunting such creatures was not a casual endeavor. It required planning, cooperation, tools, and patience, the hallmarks of an intelligence honed under pressure. Other megafauna presented different challenges. The giant short-faced bear, Arctodus, could run at surprising speeds despite its immense size. A single encounter could be fatal. Sabre-toothed cats and lions, as discussed, were smaller, but no less deadly. Hunting strategically, giant hyenas and wild dogs worked in packs to overwhelm both prey and competitors. Rivers held enormous crocodiles, capable of seizing prey in a flash. Even the landscape itself, cliffs, ice, water, demanded respect and caution. Humans learned that the earth was a theater of danger, and only careful observation, strategy, and cooperation allowed them to survive. Megafauna also influenced migration patterns. Early humans followed herds of herbivores across continents, tracking food and adapting to seasonal changes. They learned the rhythms of the land, the movements of the giants, and the best strategies for harvesting resources without falling victim to predators or environmental hazards. Knowledge of animal behavior became a survival skill, embedded in memory and likely shared through gesture, demonstration, and early forms of communication. Some species were ambivalent allies. Elephants, for instance, could be deadly if approached, but also provided shelter and resources when carcasses were scavenged or tusks were used. Mastodons, giant ground sloths, and other megafauna shaped the land itself, flattening vegetation, creating pathways, and altering water flow. Humans learned to navigate these changing landscapes, reading the subtle signs left behind by creatures whose strength dwarfed their own. Encounters with megafauna required both courage and humility. Humans could not challenge these creatures directly with brute force. Instead, they relied on ingenuity, traps, coordinated hunts, endurance strategies, and the strategic use of fire. The Acheulean hand axes of Homo ergaster, or the later tools of Homo sapiens, allowed humans to manipulate their environment, process large carcasses, and defend themselves in ways that no predator could anticipate. Tools became extensions of the body, a means to bridge the gap between fragile human form and the enormous power of the megafauna surrounding them. Predation by megafauna was a constant reality. Fossil evidence shows humans coexisting with predators that could kill them instantly, forcing acute situational awareness. The survival of early humans depended on understanding both predator and prey behavior. They tracked, they observed, they predicted. Even a small mistake, approaching too closely, underestimating speed, misjudging terrain, could mean death. And yet, humans endured. Every encounter, every narrow escape, honed skills that were passed to the next generation, reinforcing knowledge, coordination, and intelligence. The megafauna also influenced social structure. Coordinating a hunt or defending a campsite against large predators required communication, cooperation, and planning. Roles likely emerged within groups: sentries, hunters, gatherers, caregivers, each understanding how to contribute to the survival of the whole. This social sophistication would become a defining trait of humanity, a strategy as vital as any spear or tool. Life with megafauna demanded adaptability. Humans moved with the seasons, altered hunting techniques according to prey size, and constantly modified tools to meet new challenges. They observed reproduction patterns, migration routes, and environmental cues to optimize survival. Each generation learned from the last, refining techniques, teaching the young, and passing down knowledge that allowed human populations to persist in an environment that could have erased them in an instant. Even death was instructive. Fossils show evidence of scavenging, both by humans and predators, suggesting that every carcass was a lesson in resource management, tool use, and predator avoidance. Bones bear marks not only of human tools, but also of hyenas, lions, and saber-toothed cats. Each mark tells a story, a moment of confrontation, competition, or cooperation. Early humans had to interpret these signals to survive, teaching that life in the Pleistocene was a continuous negotiation with the world and its inhabitants. The megafauna also left an imprint on human imagination. To witness a mammoth moving across the plain, or a giant bear standing on hind legs, must have inspired both awe and fear. These experiences likely seeded the earliest forms of myth, ritual, and storytelling, ways for humans to understand, share, and make sense of the overwhelming forces that shaped their lives. Every encounter with a giant creature became part of the collective memory of a group, reinforcing cooperation, teaching caution, and fostering imagination. Ultimately, humans did not dominate the Pleistocene megafauna through brute strength. They survived through intelligence, cooperation, adaptability, and an intimate understanding of their environment. Each successful hunt, each avoided predator, each carefully navigated river or cliff edge was a victory. Humans learned to respect these giants, to study them, and to use them wisely. The megafauna, in turn, shaped humanity, driving physical adaptation, social complexity, and the cognitive skills that define us today. In the endless dance of predator, prey, and observer, humans became more than fragile creatures. They became learners, innovators, and survivors. The Pleistocene megafauna were both threat and teacher, shaping the evolution of intelligence, cooperation, and foresight. Every encounter with these giants etched lessons into the human mind, leaving a legacy that resonates across millennia. To walk among these creatures was to live on the edge of possibility and peril, and yet humanity endured, growing stronger, smarter, and more adaptable with every passing generation, learning the rhythms, risks, and rewards of a world filled with giants. In the prehistoric world, every step carried danger. Every decision, no matter how small, could mean life or death. The relationship between predator and prey was not occasional or random. It was constant, shaping the very fabric of existence for early humans. Survival depended on vigilance, strategy, and a deep understanding of the rhythms of life and death in a world that knew no mercy. Imagine walking across the African plains, the golden grass brushing against your legs, the sun dipping low behind distant hills. Your ears are alert to the slightest rustle. Your eyes scan the horizon for movement. Somewhere in the distance, a lion rests beneath a tree, muscles tensed and ready. Hyenas patrol along the river, bones of previous kills clenched in their jaws. A crocodile waits silently in the murky water ahead, and yet there are opportunities: antelope to hunt, edible roots to gather, water to drink. Every choice must be weighed, every action measured. The balance between predator and prey is razor thin. Early humans were both hunter and hunted. They relied on their tools, their wits, and their cooperation to tip the scales in their favor. Stone flakes could strip meat, sharpened hand axes could defend against an ambush, and coordinated movement allowed a group to outmaneuver predators. Yet the predators were relentless and adaptive. Lions hunted in stealth, hyenas in packs, and saber-toothed cats struck with precision. Humans had to anticipate, observe, and plan, or risk extinction. The constant threat of predation shaped not only behavior, but anatomy. Those with sharper senses, faster reflexes, and better endurance had greater chances of surviving and passing on their genes. Eyes became more discerning, ears more acute, and brains more capable of processing multiple sources of danger simultaneously. Humans were learning to predict predator behavior, recognize signs of their presence, and react effectively, a cognitive edge that would define the species. Predator-prey dynamics also fostered innovation. Humans developed endurance running, coordinated hunting, and later control of fire, all as responses to the ever-present threat of death. They learned to use terrain to their advantage, moving along ridges, avoiding ambush points, and setting traps where predators might overreach. Observation became a crucial survival skill. Humans could track footprints, interpret broken twigs, and even read subtle changes in animal behavior to anticipate danger or opportunity. But the pressure of being prey was relentless. Nightfall brought new dangers as previously unseen predators emerged from hiding. Human sleep was light and fragmented, punctuated by the sounds of distant howls, roars, and rustling grass. Vigilance became instinct. Even in moments of apparent calm, early humans were aware that one misstep could invite disaster. Fear, once overwhelming, became a guiding force, shaping every movement and decision. Predator encounters were also a form of education. Every failed hunt or ambush taught lessons in strategy, timing, and caution. Humans learned to share knowledge, warning signals, coordinated defense, and escape routes were communicated through gestures, vocalizations, and demonstration. These small acts of communication strengthened group cohesion and enhanced survival prospects, creating the foundation for complex social structures. Predators, in turn, adapted to human behavior. The dance between hunter and hunted was dynamic, each influencing the other. Over thousands of generations, humans became more strategic, predators more observant. The constant pressure of predation selected for intelligence, adaptability, and cooperation, qualities that would ultimately define humanity's edge over every other species in their ecosystem. Even beyond direct encounters, the threat of predators influenced daily life. Humans chose campsites with defensive advantages, avoided high-risk areas, and timed movements to reduce exposure. The presence of predators dictated migration patterns, hunting schedules, and even social interactions. Survival was not about raw strength alone. It was about understanding the environment, anticipating risk, and responding collectively. The constant threat of predation also forged resilience. Humans experienced fear, hunger, and exhaustion in cycles that tested both mind and body. Each day survived was a reinforcement of knowledge and skill. They became capable of enduring extreme conditions, maintaining focus under stress, and making rapid, effective decisions, abilities that allowed them to persist where many other species failed. This unending tension between predator and prey also shaped imagination and culture. Early humans likely observed patterns, remembered encounters, and shared stories. The need to interpret danger may have seeded the earliest myths, rituals, and communal narratives. Fear became a teacher, guiding action and strengthening memory. In learning to survive predators, humans were also learning to conceptualize the world, to imagine threats beyond immediate perception, and to plan accordingly. Even the landscape bore witness to this struggle. Bones with bite marks, broken tools, and abandoned campsites tell a story of constant negotiation with death. Each fossilized footprint or partially devoured carcass is evidence of this intimate and brutal interaction. Humans were small, vulnerable, and fragile, yet remarkably adaptive. The pressure of being prey honed skills, shaped anatomy, and forged social structures that would endure through millennia. Consider a single day. Humans leave the safety of their morning camp, stalking a small herd of antelope. They must move quietly, avoid exposure, and coordinate their approach. A lion watches from the ridge, unseen at first. A hyena pack moves in the distance, testing the area for weakness. Every moment is a calculation, every action a potential risk or advantage. The humans succeed in capturing some prey, fend off a lone predator with tools and teamwork, and return to camp with both nourishment and experience gained. The day has been a victory, not of power alone, but of intelligence, cooperation, and foresight. This delicate balance between predator and prey is the crucible in which humanity was forged. Constant threat was not merely an obstacle, it was a teacher, shaping every physical, cognitive, and social trait. Humans survived not because they were the strongest, fastest, or fiercest, but because they adapted, observed, cooperated, and learned. Every encounter with death was an opportunity to refine these skills, embedding resilience, foresight, and ingenuity into the very fabric of their being. In the end, The predator-prey dynamic defined the early human experience. It was relentless, unforgiving, and omnipresent. Yet from this crucible of danger arose intelligence, strategy, and social cohesion, the very traits that would allow humans to endure the harshest landscapes of the Pleistocene and, eventually, to dominate the planet in ways no other species could. To walk the Pleistocene plains was to exist in a constant state of alertness, balancing fear with action, observation with innovation, and danger with opportunity. Every step was measured, every decision carried weight, and every day survived was a triumph of intellect, cooperation, and the indomitable will to live. Humanity was learning, growing, and shaping itself in the shadow of predators. And in that shadow, it became extraordinary. From the relentless pressures of the Pleistocene, Savannah and forests emerged a remarkable species, Homo sapiens. Unlike their predecessors, these early humans combined endurance, intelligence, and social cohesion in ways that transformed survival into mastery. Their evolution was not a sudden event, but a gradual process shaped over hundreds of thousands of years by the constant interplay of danger, resourcefulness, and innovation. Imagine a small group of early Homo sapiens moving along a riverbank in East Africa. Their frames are lean and tall, their hands dexterous, their faces expressive. Eyes scan the terrain for threats and opportunities. Fingers manipulate tools with precision, crafting sharp points from stones and bones. Muscles are adapted for long-distance travel, for carrying resources, and for the subtle movements of hunting and gathering. Every physical trait tells a story of adaptation, of survival honed over countless generations. The evolution of Homo sapiens was as much mental as physical. Brains were larger and more complex than any previous hominin species, averaging around 1,350 cubic centimeters. This increased capacity allowed for enhanced memory, planning, and abstract thinking. Humans could imagine outcomes, predict animal behavior, and devise strategies that other species could not. This cognitive leap transformed hunting, tool making, and social interaction into activities far more sophisticated than instinct alone could support. Early Homo sapiens were innovators. Tools evolved from simple flakes and hand axes into specialized implements, blades for cutting, scrapers for processing hides, points for hunting, and composite tools that combined multiple functions. These innovations allowed humans to exploit resources more efficiently, process food more effectively, and defend themselves with increasing confidence. Tools became extensions of the mind, tangible representations of strategy and foresight. Social structures also became more complex. Cooperation, already vital in earlier species, intensified. Humans learned to organize hunts, share resources, and protect the vulnerable. They developed communication systems, likely a combination of gestures, vocalizations, and early symbolic behavior that allowed knowledge to be transferred across individuals and generations. Culture began to emerge, shared practices, norms, and rituals that strengthened group cohesion and improved survival prospects. The relationship between Homo sapiens and their environment was one of observation and manipulation. Humans tracked the movements of prey, studied predator behavior, and learned to use fire and landscape to their advantage. Fire once a rare natural phenomenon, became a controlled tool for warmth, cooking, and protection. Campsites were strategically chosen for safety, access to resources, and defense against predators. Early humans were no longer merely reacting to their environment, they were shaping it, adapting it to suit their needs. Encounters with predators and megafauna continued to influence behavior. Sabre-toothed cats, lions, hyenas, and crocodiles still posed threats, but humans approached these dangers with strategy rather than fear alone. Cooperative hunting, early weapons, and tactical retreats allowed them to coexist with creatures that could easily have overwhelmed them. These interactions reinforced observation skills, communication, and social organization, embedding them into human behavior and shaping evolutionary outcomes. Migration played a critical role in the evolution of early Homo sapiens. Humans began to spread beyond East Africa, following herds, exploiting new environments, and encountering different climates and challenges. They adapted to deserts, savannas, and woodlands, each new landscape refining their skills and behaviors. Environmental pressures, temperature extremes, variable food availability, and novel predators drove both innovation and physical adaptation. Humans became highly versatile, able to endure conditions that would have been impossible for earlier hominins. Symbolic thinking began to appear. Evidence from archaeological sites shows early humans creating engravings, ornaments, and possibly even early art. These behaviors suggest an awareness of self, group identity, and abstract concepts. The mind was no longer merely reactive, it was imaginative, capable of projecting ideas, creating narratives, and transmitting complex knowledge. This cognitive evolution was as crucial as physical adaptation for survival. Dietary adaptation was another defining feature. Early Homo sapiens had a broad diet, consuming meat, plants, nuts, seeds, and tubers. Hunting large game required cooperation and planning, while gathering required detailed knowledge of plant cycles and seasonal availability. This dietary flexibility allowed humans to survive in diverse habitats and reduced vulnerability to environmental change. Nutrition, in turn, supported continued brain growth and cognitive sophistication, creating a positive feedback loop that strengthened survival. Tool use and environmental manipulation also encouraged social learning. Knowledge of crafting techniques, hunting strategies, and resource locations was shared within groups. These skills became cumulative, innovations built upon previous ones, leading to increasingly sophisticated behaviors. Culture was emerging as a mechanism for survival, as important as speed, strength, or agility. Humans were not only adapting individually, they were adapting collectively. By this stage, early Homo sapiens had begun to distinguish themselves from other hominins. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other contemporaries shared the landscape, but humans' combination of endurance, cooperation, cognitive flexibility, and innovation provided an edge. They were capable of long-distance planning, symbolic thought, and rapid adaptation to new environments, traits that allowed them to survive where others eventually vanished. Even daily life was shaped by these evolutionary advances. Campsites became centers of strategy, observation, and learning. Fire provided security and a place for socialization. Tool making encouraged dexterity and problem solving. Coordinated hunting and defense fostered communication and cooperation. The constant presence of predators, environmental hazards, and resource competition ensured that intelligence, foresight, and social cohesion were continuously tested and refined. In essence, the evolution of early Homo sapiens represents the culmination of millions of years of pressure, adaptation, and survival in a world of immense danger. They were physically capable, mentally sophisticated, socially organized, and culturally aware. Every challenge faced, from predators to megafauna, from environmental extremes to intergroup competition, was an opportunity for adaptation. Every success reinforced traits that would define the species and shape the trajectory of humanity. Walking across the Pleistocene landscape, early humans carried both vulnerability and ingenuity. They were small and fragile, yet astonishingly capable. The evolution of Homo sapiens was a story of resilience, intelligence, and cooperation, a triumph not of brute force but of observation, adaptation, and foresight. In facing the world's constant dangers, humans became more than survivors. They became architects of their own destiny, laying the foundation for every human achievement that would follow. While early Homo sapiens were evolving in Africa, another branch of humanity was emerging in Europe and Western Asia. The Neanderthals, known scientifically as Homo neanderthalensis, these humans were remarkably adapted to the harsh, often frigid climates of Ice Age Europe. Stocky, muscular, and powerful, they were built for endurance and survival in environments that were both physically demanding and teeming with predators. Imagine a snow-covered valley, the wind biting through furs and robes made from animal hides. A group of Neanderthals moves slowly, scanning the horizon for threats and prey alike. Their short, strong limbs are perfect for cold climates, conserving heat and allowing them to maneuver efficiently through dense forests or across icy plains. Broad chests and powerful lungs sustain long, taxing hunts, and their hands, thick-fingered and strong, handle heavy tools with precision. Every feature of their anatomy tells a story of adaptation to danger and necessity. Neanderthals lived in a world where predators were ever present. Lions, bears, and hyenas shared the landscape, as did smaller, cunning hunters like wolves and saber-toothed cats. Encounters with these creatures were constant reminders that survival depended on skill, foresight, and social cooperation. Neanderthals learned to move carefully, to read tracks in snow or mud, and to anticipate the behavior of both prey and predators. These lessons were life-saving, passed down through generations as part of the culture of survival. Their tools were heavy and versatile. Large, sharp flint blades and scrapers allowed them to butcher large game, fashion hides, and even create shelters. Spears could be thrust or thrown, giving them the ability to hunt from a safer distance. These tools were not merely objects, they were extensions of their intelligence, amplifying their physical power and helping them manipulate a dangerous environment to their advantage. Neanderthals were also strategic hunters. They frequently targeted large Ice Age mammals, such as mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and reindeer. Coordinating group efforts, they could drive herds into natural traps or ambush points. Every hunt demanded careful observation of terrain animal behavior, and timing. A failed hunt could mean hunger for days, while a successful one ensured food, clothing, and tools, the foundation of survival. Despite their strength and skills, Neanderthals were not invincible. Their environment was harsh, food sources unpredictable, and predators plentiful. Survival required constant vigilance, particularly in winter when resources were scarce and threats were amplified. Fire became central to daily life, providing warmth, protection, and a place to process food. Mastery of fire, while shared with early Homo sapiens, was essential for enduring the brutal winters of Ice Age Europe. Social structures were vital. Neanderthal groups were likely small but tight-knit, with cooperation and resource sharing crucial for survival. Injured members were cared for, knowledge of hunting routes and predator behavior was shared, and collective vigilance provided protection against the ever-present dangers of the wild. In many ways, their social bonds were a direct response to the challenges of living in such a predator-rich and unforgiving landscape. Cognitive abilities of Neanderthals were impressive, while their brains were similar in size to early Homo sapiens. Their intelligence was adapted for survival under extreme conditions. They developed tools, coordinated hunts, managed fire, and likely had forms of communication sufficient to convey complex strategies. Evidence suggests that they may have engaged in symbolic behavior, using pigments, personal ornaments, or ritual practices, hinting at cognitive sophistication comparable to modern humans. The interaction between Neanderthals and predators shaped behavior in subtle ways. Large carnivores required vigilance during hunting, travel, and resting periods. Tracks, scents, and subtle environmental cues were constantly monitored. Even young Neanderthals would have learned to interpret these signs, building instincts that were vital for survival. Fear was ever present, but it was tempered by skill, cooperation, and experience. Predation was not the only pressure shaping Neanderthals. Competition with other human species, including early Homo sapiens, created additional survival challenges. Resources were finite, and encounters could lead to conflict, cooperation, or assimilation. Fossil evidence suggests that interactions occurred over thousands of years, influencing migration patterns, cultural practices, and even genetics. Neanderthals were part of a complex ecological and social network that included both other humans and the multitude of predators around them. Even daily life was infused with risk. Gathering firewood, foraging for plants, or traveling between hunting grounds required constant awareness. Storms, icy rivers, and treacherous terrain added layers of danger to an already perilous existence. Survival demanded not only physical prowess, but the ability to anticipate challenges, plan routes, and cooperate effectively with group members. Neanderthals' relationship with their environment demonstrates an extraordinary combination of adaptability and resilience. They were capable of enduring climates and ecosystems that would have overwhelmed less versatile species. Their evolution was a response to the dual pressures of predation and environment, resulting in a species finely tuned to survive in extreme conditions while maintaining complex social and cognitive capabilities. Encounters with predators, as with early humans, taught lessons that extended beyond immediate survival. Observation, patience, strategy, and cooperation became ingrained traits passed through generations. Every hunt, every narrow escape, and every cautious step shaped both behavior and culture. Neanderthals were learners as much as they were hunters, adapting continuously to a world that offered no guarantees. In essence, Neanderthals exemplify the delicate balance of strength, intelligence, and social cohesion required to survive in a predator dominated world. Their story is one of endurance under pressure, innovation under threat, and the extraordinary capacity of humans to adapt to the most extreme conditions. As the sun sets over an ice age valley, a Neanderthal group huddles in a sheltered area, tending embers, sharing knowledge, and preparing for the night ahead. Predators may be near, the cold may be biting, but within the group is safety, intelligence, and experience honed over thousands of generations. They endure, they adapt, and they teach, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of humans, even in the harshest corners of prehistoric Earth. The forest was a different world entirely from the open savanna. Here, shadows and foliage created a labyrinth of danger, where every movement could conceal a predator and every sound carried a warning. Early humans stepping into the forest faced a unique set of challenges, not from the open chase predators of the plains, but from creatures that hunted with stealth, patience, and deadly precision. Leopards, crocodiles, and venomous snakes were masters of this shadowed realm, and humans had to adapt quickly or risk being claimed by the forest itself. Imagine walking along the edge of a dense riverine forest in the late afternoon. The canopy above filters sunlight into scattered beams, the air thick with humidity, and the floor is a mosaic of roots, fallen leaves, and shifting shadows. Every crack, rustle, or distant splash could signal a predator. Leopards, silent and deadly, crouch unseen on branches or behind undergrowth, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Their spotted coats are natural camouflage, blending seamlessly with the dappled light and shadows, making them almost invisible until they move. These felines were not only agile, but intelligent. Leopards hunt opportunistically, able to adjust strategies depending on the prey, terrain, and time of day. For early humans, even a single leopard encounter could be fatal. The stealth and strength of the predator meant that vigilance, cooperation, and acute awareness were essential. Humans learned to recognize signs, flattened grass, claw marks on trees, or fresh tracks in mud, all warnings that a predator had passed and might still be near. Waterways presented another danger. Crocodiles, lying in wait beneath the surface, could strike with blinding speed. Early humans approaching a river for water or to cross into new territory risked ambush. The eyes and nostrils of a crocodile barely break the surface, and its muscular tail and jaws could drag an unwary human into the murky depths. Crossing rivers required observation, timing, and sometimes improvisation. Stepping stones, shallow fords, or waiting for predators to move. Even then, vigilance was critical. The forest was alive with hidden threats. Venomous snakes added a more insidious layer of danger, from the small but lethal vipers to the large constrictors capable of overpowering a human. Snakes were masters of concealment. Their ability to blend into leaf litter, burrows, or tree branches made them nearly invisible. Early humans learned caution, testing the ground carefully, shaking branches before stepping, and observing snake behavior from a distance. One misstep could result in paralysis or death. The forest demanded not only courage, but constant alertness and respect for the hidden dangers. Encounters with these predators shaped early human cognition and social behavior. Observation and memory were essential. Understanding patterns, the timing of leopard hunts, crocodile ambush strategies, or the venomous seasons of snakes allowed humans to navigate the forest safely. Group movement was critical. Individuals relied on one another to alert the group, to share knowledge, and to coordinate safe passage. Communication, both verbal and nonverbal, became a life-saving necessity. Tool use was another adaptation to forest dangers. Sharp sticks could probe holes or underbrush to test for snakes. Spears provided a distance barrier against both ambush predators and aggressive prey. Fire offered both light and deterrence. Even the act of crafting and carrying tools was a direct response to the challenges of moving through a predator-dense environment. Humans were learning to extend their intelligence into physical objects, creating a buffer between themselves and the lethal world around them. The forest also demanded flexibility in hunting and gathering. Prey here was different from the plains. Monkeys, birds, and smaller mammals moved in trees and shadows, requiring patience, climbing skills, and strategy. Humans adapted by developing specialized tools, careful tracking techniques, and cooperative strategies to outmaneuver agile and cautious prey. Every successful hunt was a lesson in patience, observation, and skill, and a means to sustain life in a risky habitat. Night intensified the danger. Darkness in the forest was absolute, and sounds carried in unpredictable ways. Predators became more active, guided by acute hearing and smell. Humans, often restricted to small clearings or temporary shelters, relied on heightened senses and group vigilance. Sleep was cautious, with some individuals likely taking shifts to watch for predators. The forest was alive at night, and every sense was tested. Predators were also teachers. Leopards demonstrated the value of patience and stealth. Crocodiles taught the danger of hidden threats in familiar places. Snakes reinforced careful observation and respect for subtle signs in the environment. Humans internalized these lessons, improving their ability to anticipate danger, coordinate actions, and respond with precision. Survival became a skill refined over a lifetime and passed to younger generations. Even in the forest, humans were not only reactive, they became innovators. Elevated sleeping platforms, campfires, and carefully chosen shelters reduced vulnerability. Knowledge of predator habits allowed humans to move with confidence, turning a hostile environment into a manageable one. Yet even the most prepared group remained humble, aware that the forest always held dangers beyond immediate perception. The forest was a crucible for human development. Navigating shadows and threats honed senses, enhanced intelligence, and reinforced cooperation. It was a place where fear became a teacher, vigilance a habit, and adaptation a necessity. Humans who mastered these skills survived, while those who did not quickly disappeared from the fossil record. In essence, the predators of the forest, leopards, crocodiles, and venomous snakes were both threat and guide. They forced humans to observe, to plan, and to work together. They shaped the physical, cognitive, and social evolution of early humans in profound ways. To walk through the forest was to negotiate constant danger, but it was also to learn endurance, strategy, and ingenuity, lessons that would echo through every generation. As dusk settled over the dense foliage, a group of early humans huddled near a small fire, listening to the rustle of leaves and distant animal calls. Awareness was sharp, senses alert, but within the circle of firelight, there was safety, strategy, and shared knowledge. The predators of the forest had been acknowledged, respected, and mitigated through skill and cooperation. In this delicate balance, humans endured, learning to thrive even where shadows held death. Among the most formidable predators faced by early humans were the saber-toothed cats, formidable hunters whose power, stealth, and specialized anatomy made them the ultimate symbols of Pleistocene danger. Two of the most notorious species were Homotherium and Dinofelis. Unlike modern cats, these predators were built not just for speed, but for precision, strength, and lethality. To encounter one in the wild was to face a creature perfectly designed to dominate its environment and potentially to dominate you. Homotherium, often called the scimitar-toothed cat, was a predator of astonishing size and power. With long, muscular forelimbs and shorter, agile hind legs, it was built for ambush and endurance rather than sprinting alone. Its upper canines, long and curved, could slice through flesh and crush vital organs with terrifying efficiency. This was not a predator to be underestimated. It was capable of taking down large prey, and even a single encounter with a human could be fatal. Dinofelis, a smaller but equally cunning saber-toothed cat, thrived in forests and woodlands. Its build favored stealth, patience, and strategy. Dinofelis could stalk silently among the trees, using the cover of foliage to close in on its prey. Unlike Homotherium, which relied on open spaces and ambush strength, Dinofelis exemplified adaptability, making it a threat in environments where humans might have felt comparatively safe. Both species were reminders that survival in the Pleistocene required constant vigilance. Early humans likely developed an acute awareness of these predators. Signs of their presence, tracks, claw marks on trees, the remains of partially consumed prey, were invaluable warnings. Humans learned to interpret subtle cues, the angle of broken branches, the disturbance of leaf litter, the faint scent of a predator lingering in the wind. Observation became a survival skill, honed over countless encounters and reinforced through teaching and repetition. Hunting techniques of these saber-toothed cats were sophisticated. Homotherium, with its powerful forelimbs and elongated canines, could immobilize prey with swift, precise strikes. Dinofelis used stealth and ambush, often pouncing from elevated positions in dense vegetation. Their strategies required intelligence and patience, traits that early humans had to match with caution, timing, and cooperation to survive. Encountering one was never random. It was a test of awareness, decision-making, and instinct. Humans responded with tools and tactics. Spears, hand axes, and fire became critical assets. Groups coordinated to monitor territory, avoid known predator paths, and create defensive strategies. Early humans learned to anticipate where these cats would hunt, adjusting travel routes and camping locations accordingly. Every choice, from which river to cross to where to sleep for the night, was influenced by the presence of these predators. The danger of Homotherium and Dinofelis was not only physical, but psychological. These predators imposed a constant sense of threat, sharpening vigilance and reinforcing social bonds. Fear, managed and channeled, became a tool for survival. Humans learned to respect these predators, to avoid them, and when necessary, to defend against them with ingenuity and courage. Encounters left lessons etched into memory, shaping behavior and culture across generations. Evidence from fossil sites tells stories of these interactions: bite marks on bones, remains of prey carefully stripped and abandoned, and traces of saber-toothed activity near human sites suggest a delicate balance. Humans were often scavengers of their own risks, learning to exploit opportunities while avoiding deadly confrontation. Survival required constant calculation, from the moment a predator was detected to the decision to move, hide, or defend. The presence of saber-toothed cats also influenced hunting strategies. Humans could not confront such predators directly without significant risk. Instead, endurance hunting, group coordination, and tactical retreats became essential. By studying prey behavior, early humans also learned to avoid predators, using the same intelligence and observation skills that allowed them to succeed in hunting. Knowledge became a form of armor, as vital as any spear or stone tool. Even daily life was shaped by their threat. Campsites were selected with consideration for predator movement patterns. Nighttime vigilance was heightened. Paths between food and water sources were chosen carefully. In these ways, saber-toothed cats indirectly molded human behavior, culture, and survival strategies. Every movement, every decision, every teaching moment around fire or shelter carried the imprint of these apex predators. Yet humans endured. Their ingenuity, social cohesion, and adaptability allowed them to coexist with creatures that could have been lethal at every turn. These cats, formidable as they were, became part of the selective pressure that honed human intelligence, foresight, and cooperation. The very traits that allowed humans to survive the Pleistocene: planning, observation, social strategy, tool use, were reinforced by the presence of predators like Homotherium and Dinofelis. The legacy of these encounters extends beyond survival. Humans learned to read their environment, predict danger, and manipulate resources in ways that became foundational for culture, cognition, and social organization. Fire, shelter, weapons, and communication were not just conveniences, they were necessities crafted in response to apex predators. Every innovation, every behavioral adaptation was in part a reaction to the sharp teeth and silent patience of the saber-toothed cats. Picture the forest at twilight. The light dims, shadows lengthen, and the rustle of leaves hints at movement. A Homotherium prowls at the forest edge, muscles coiled and teeth bared. A Dinofelis watches silently from a branch, its eyes reflecting the fading light. In a small human camp, someone nudges embers to life, another scans the darkening forest, and the group moves quietly together. Survival is a careful dance, a balance of observation, caution, and cooperation. Each day endured is a testament to adaptability, intelligence, and vigilance. In essence, Homotherium and Dinofelis were more than predators. They were teachers. Through their threat, early humans learned the value of observation, strategy, and social cohesion. They reinforced instincts, honed skills, and shaped behavior in ways that extended far beyond immediate survival. These saber-toothed cats were formidable, relentless, and deadly, yet they also catalyzed the evolution of human intelligence, cooperation, and foresight, leaving a legacy that resonates through the story of human survival. Across the open plains of the Pleistocene, danger moved in broad strides. Here, predators dominated through size, speed, and strategy. Hyenas, lions, and the formidable dire wolves were apex threats, constantly shaping the lives and behavior of early humans. Each species had unique hunting styles, strengths, and cunning, lessons in survival for any human venturing across the grasslands. Hyenas, often underestimated today, were relentless scavengers and hunters. Their jaws could crush bone, leaving nothing behind. Packs coordinated like a well-oiled machine, chasing prey over long distances until exhaustion took its toll. For early humans, hyenas were not only competitors for food, but unpredictable killers. Encounters required constant vigilance, clever use of terrain, and sometimes retreat into trees or rocky shelters. Every sound of distant howls signaled the presence of a hungry pack, demanding awareness and strategic thinking. Lions were masters of ambush, moving silently in tall grasses. They relied on bursts of speed and strength to bring down large herbivores. A single strike could mean death for an unprepared human. Humans learned to observe hunting patterns, avoid open areas at vulnerable times, and travel in groups for safety. Lions reinforced the need for cooperation, communication, and careful planning, the very skills that strengthened human social bonds. Dire wolves, larger and stronger than modern gray wolves, hunted in packs with intelligence and coordination. They could chase prey for miles, encircle it, and bring it down together. Early humans had to account for these predators during migration, hunting, or scavenging. Awareness of pack size, movement patterns, and environmental cover became critical knowledge passed across generations. These predators also indirectly shaped human evolution. Endurance running, strategic planning, and tool making were responses to the threats of plains predators. Humans became agile thinkers, capable of anticipating danger, communicating effectively, and using ingenuity to survive. Every day on the plains demanded attention, observation, and courage. The giants of the Pleistocene were more than just killers. They were instructors in vigilance, strategy, and social cooperation. To walk the plains was to live in a world ruled by these predators. Every step, every pause, and every decision was influenced by their presence. And in learning to navigate this deadly landscape, early humans honed the intelligence, teamwork, and adaptability that would define our species. The plains were perilous, but they also forged the skills and instincts that allowed humans to endure and eventually thrive in a dangerous, predator-filled world. Rivers were lifelines for early humans, offering water, fish, and fertile surroundings. Yet they also concealed some of the most lethal predators of the Pleistocene. Giant crocodiles lurked beneath calm surfaces, patient and deadly, capable of ambushing any creature that came too close. For humans, rivers were not merely resources, they were gauntlets of danger, demanding vigilance, intelligence, and strategy. Imagine standing on a riverbank, sunlight glinting off the water, unaware that a massive crocodile waits just beneath the murky surface. These predators could reach lengths of up to 7 meters, with jaws strong enough to crush bones and drag prey into watery depths. Their ambush tactics were chillingly effective, nearly invisible in water, silent until the strike, and capable of killing in seconds. One wrong step into shallow water, one careless approach while drinking, could prove fatal. Early humans learned to read signs, disturbed mud, ripples in water, or unusual movement of fish hinted at the presence of crocodiles. Observation and caution became ingrained behaviors, taught from generation to generation. Crossing rivers required ingenuity, selecting shallow fords, using floating debris, or waiting for predators to move. Knowledge of crocodile habits was survival knowledge. These dangers shaped human innovation. Tools like long sticks could test water depth or poke at hidden predators. Campfires near riverbanks served not only for warmth, but also as a deterrent. Humans learned to approach water with patience, observation, and teamwork. Collecting water or fishing became a coordinated activity, reinforcing social bonds and teaching vigilance. Rivers also held other threats. Hippos, large snakes, and aggressive fish could surprise the unwary. Humans adapted by timing movements, staying on banks, and maintaining awareness of every shadow, ripple, and sound. The river was a dynamic, living hazard, both provider and predator, demanding constant attention. In essence, giant crocodiles and river dangers were teachers. They forced early humans to develop observation, caution, cooperation, and strategic thinking. Each encounter reinforced skills crucial for survival. In the shadow of these deadly waters, humans learned that life required not only strength, but patience, ingenuity, and respect for the environment. Rivers were perilous, yet indispensable, shaping behaviors and adaptations that would echo throughout human evolution. Among the most insidious threats to early humans were snakes, masters of concealment, patience, and precision. Forests, grasslands, and riverbanks were home to venomous vipers, cobras, and large constrictors. Unlike open chase predators, snakes relied on ambush and stealth, striking suddenly with lethal accuracy. For early humans, they were a constant reminder that danger could be hidden in the smallest, most unsuspecting corners of their world. Imagine stepping through thick underbrush, the ground uneven beneath your feet, when a snake suddenly strikes from a leaf-covered branch or a hidden burrow. Venomous species delivered toxins that could paralyze, induce shock, or cause death within hours. Constrictors, on the other hand, relied on brute force, wrapping their muscular bodies around prey to suffocate it. For humans, both types demanded respect, observation, and caution at every step. Early humans developed behaviors to mitigate this threat. Careful scanning of paths, probing under rocks and vegetation with sticks, and shaking branches before passing became instinctual actions. Knowledge of habitats, where snakes nested, hunted, or rested, was passed across generations. Even Children would have learned these behaviors early, understanding that survival depended on awareness and caution. The presence of snakes also influenced tool use. Sharp sticks, spears, and digging tools served not only for hunting, but for safely confronting or deterring snakes. Humans learned to modify their environment subtly, clearing campsites of debris, avoiding snake-prone areas, and constructing shelters elevated from the ground. Even fire provided a deterrent, keeping snakes at bay during nighttime rest. Encounters with snakes were not only dangerous but educational. Each bite, close call, or observation reinforced patterns, teaching humans to anticipate movement, interpret environmental cues, and act decisively. Snakes became instructors in patience, observation, and respect for hidden threats, qualities essential for survival in all predator-filled landscapes. In essence, deadly snakes shaped early human behavior, cognition, and culture. They demanded vigilance, cleverness, and foresight. Every forest path, riverbank, or grassland clearing became a potential classroom in survival, teaching humans to move with caution, interpret subtle signs, and respect the silent, patient predators that shared their world. In the shadow of ambush, specialists, humans, honed the skills that would carry them through a perilous prehistoric world. Fire was more than warmth or light for early humans. It was a lifeline, a shield against the constant threats that surrounded them. Predators roamed the plains, forests, and riverbanks, and nighttime was a particularly perilous time when visibility dropped and danger increased. Fire provided both a physical barrier and a psychological advantage, transforming darkness from a realm of fear into a controlled environment where humans could strategize, rest, and thrive. Imagine a small group of early humans huddled around flickering flames, the crackle of burning wood cutting through the sounds of distant predators. Lions may be prowling in tall grasses, hyenas howling in the distance, crocodiles waiting by the river. The fire serves as both warning and deterrent. Predators are cautious. The light, heat, and smoke signal the presence of humans who are alert and prepared. Fire gave early humans a measure of control in an otherwise unpredictable world. Mastery of fire required observation, practice, and ingenuity. Humans learned to start fires using friction, sparks from stones, or capturing natural flames. Maintaining the fire demanded fuel, attention, and knowledge of wind, weather, and available materials. This constant engagement with fire reinforced social cohesion. One person tended the flames, another monitored the surroundings, while others prepared food or tools. It became a center for activity, communication, and teaching. Fire also extended the hours of activity. Hunting preparation, tool crafting, and social learning could continue into the night. Food could be cooked, making it easier to digest and safer to eat, reducing the risk of illness. Shelters near the fire offered protection from cold and predators, creating a temporary haven in the midst of a hostile world. Beyond practical benefits, fire shaped early human cognition and culture. It encouraged planning, communication, and cooperation. Humans learned to manipulate their environment, anticipate challenges, and create solutions that amplified survival chances. Fire was both a weapon and a teacher, reinforcing lessons about risk, patience, and adaptation. In essence, fire transformed early humans from vulnerable prey into proactive survivors. It provided safety, strategy, and a center for social and cultural development. In the glow of the flames, humans learned to observe, innovate, and coordinate, turning the perpetual dangers of the Pleistocene into a crucible that honed intelligence, resilience, and community. Fire was more than survival. It was the spark that illuminated the path toward humanity's future. Hunting was the lifeblood of early human survival, a delicate balance of skill, strategy, and stamina. In a world dominated by predators and megafauna, early humans had to innovate constantly to secure food without becoming prey themselves. Their techniques evolved over millennia, from simple thrusting spears to coordinated group hunts and remarkable feats of endurance running. Imagine a small band of humans tracking a herd of antelope across the savannah. Every step is measured, every rustle of grass observed. Spears, sharpened on both ends, are ready for thrusting or throwing. Tools are extensions of the body, designed for precision and lethality. But hunting is rarely brute force alone. It is strategy. Early humans learned to observe animal behavior, anticipate movements, and exploit terrain. Hills, rivers, and natural obstacles became tools in the hunt, allowing humans to guide prey toward ambush points or traps. Endurance running was another revolutionary technique. Unlike predators that relied on bursts of speed, humans could outlast prey, tracking animals over long distances until exhaustion set in. This method required stamina, temperature regulation, and careful pacing. Hunters needed to understand their limits, coordinate with others, and read environmental cues, turning the act of pursuit into both a physical and mental challenge. Group coordination amplified success. Humans hunted cooperatively, surrounding herds, communicating through gestures or calls, and ensuring each member played a role: distractor, chaser, or ambusher. Knowledge of previous hunts, observation of predator-prey dynamics, and shared strategy transformed hunting from a dangerous gamble into a calculated endeavor. The diversity of techniques reflected adaptability. Small game required stealth, traps, and patience. Large prey demanded endurance, teamwork, and precision strikes. Tools were versatile, throwing spears for distance, hand axes for close encounters, and fire to drive prey toward hunters or away from predators. Each innovation reduced risk while increasing efficiency. Hunting also reinforced social and cognitive skills. Planning, communication, and cooperation were critical. Lessons were taught around fires and campsites, ensuring knowledge passed across generations. The hunt was more than survival. It was education, culture, and the foundation of human ingenuity. In essence, hunting techniques, from sharp spears to relentless endurance running, were the result of adaptation, intelligence, and teamwork. They allowed early humans not just to survive, but to thrive in a world filled with predators and peril, honing skills that would define the species for millennia to come. The relentless challenges of prehistoric life, predators, extreme environments, and scarce resources were not merely obstacles for early humans. They were the crucible in which our species was forged. Survival under these conditions shaped every aspect of modern humans: intelligence, social cooperation, adaptability, and even the cultural instincts that define us today. Every encounter with a predator or extreme condition honed physical and mental traits. Vigilance sharpened senses, endurance improved stamina, and the constant need to make decisions under pressure enhanced problem-solving skills. Early humans learned to anticipate threats, communicate dangers, and collaborate effectively, traits that remain central to humanity's success. The Pleistocene world demanded not only strength, but foresight, planning, and creativity. Social structures, forged in response to survival pressures, became increasingly sophisticated. Groups shared food, coordinated hunts, and cared for the injured. Knowledge of predator behavior, plant cycles, and tool making was transmitted from elders to youth, creating a culture of learning and adaptation. These early communities laid the foundations for modern social bonds, teaching humans the value of cooperation, empathy, and collective strategy. Tool use and innovation were direct responses to survival pressures. From sharpened spears to controlled fire, early humans transformed the environment to meet their needs. Each adaptation required observation, ingenuity, and experimentation, qualities that fueled cognitive development. The challenges of the prehistoric world nurtured creativity and problem solving, turning survival into a catalyst for intelligence. Fear, once a response to predators, became a guide. It taught caution, patience, and respect for danger. Humans internalized lessons from every encounter. Sabre-toothed cats, giant crocodiles, or venomous snakes, reinforcing instincts and behaviors that enhanced survival. These experiences shaped not only the body and mind, but also cultural practices, rituals, and early forms of knowledge sharing. In essence, the harsh conditions of prehistoric Earth molded the very traits that make us human: resilience, intelligence, social cooperation, and ingenuity are the legacies of a world filled with peril. Every strategy, tool, and behavior developed to navigate predators, environmental challenges, and scarcity was a step toward the species we are today. Looking back, we see that the danger-filled world of our ancestors was not just a threat, but a teacher. Survival against overwhelming odds shaped modern humans in body, mind, and spirit, a legacy of adaptation, intelligence, and cooperation that continues to define us. Now, with a smile on your face, you may have a good night's sleep. See you next time.